Okay friends, it's time to get started on our front end work. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure you have hand and eye protection for all this job. Aside from that, go ahead and safely raise and support your Jeep so the front wheels are off the ground. When you do that, you want to make sure you have your jack stands on the pinch rail. Let's get started. Now that we have the wheel up off the ground, let's continue on by removing all of our lug nuts and then the wheel. I'm just going to use one of my lug nuts on here. We'll snug it up, that way there the rotor can't move around. Now that the wheel's off, we have a nice clear view of our caliper. To start replacing that, the first thing I want to do is use some hose pliers. I'm going to come right up here and restrict the flow of brake fluid down to the caliper. After that, let's come out back to where the banjo bolt is. We're going to go ahead and loosen up this banjo bolt. Once it's broken free, just snug it a teeny bit. And then we'll move along to removing our caliper bracket bolts. There's one right here and one right above it. I'm just going to leave this one loose. Now we can remove the banjo bolt. Now with that nice and loose, let's just go ahead and take out that banjo bolt. Keep in mind, brake fluid will come out of this, so you want to make sure you have a nice collection bucket. Remove that last caliper bracket bolt. Remove your caliper. Now we're going to remove the pads from our old caliper. Just carefully press it down and remove it. Then do the same for the other one. Now let's prep our brand new caliper. To start, let's come along the back side and remove our sliders. Now when you remove these, you just want to pay attention to them. You're going to notice one of them has a rubber boot. The one with the rubber boot is going to be on the side that has the bleeder screw on it. So we have the bleeder screw right here. That means the one with the rubber boot is going to be on the same side. We'll set those aside. Grab our caliper, set that aside as well, and we're going to work with our bracket first. Now to prep the bracket, what we want to do is use a little bit of caliper grease. I'm going to go right along this area here, here, and then the same on the other side of the caliper bracket. Once you have that on there, it's going to be time to put on your tins. We'll just line this up and then slide it on. You want to ensure that these are secure. If it feels like it's rattling and ready to fall off, double check it and make sure that it's going to be completely secure before you can continue. Use a little bit of that caliper grease and just get right along inside this boot right here. We want to try to get in as much grease as possible in here. That's going to help lubricate the sliders. Now let's grab the muscle part of the caliper. That's the part with the piston right along here. The next thing we want is a little bit of this caliper grease. We're going to take it and put it right along this piston, right along the areas that it touches against the pads. Once we're done that, we're going to move along to these two ears. We'll do the same here, and this is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Now it's going to be time to clean off these sliders. I like to clean off the existing grease that's on them and put on some brand new grease as well. When you do these, you want to ensure that you get all the way up into this area up here. So essentially you can see where the threaded area is and then a little dimple. You want to get all the way up the entire shaft and then up and into that dimple. That's going to be very important because that's where the caliper slider boot is. If you don't have lube there, well, you're going to get moisture on your caliper slider. Once you get this done, we'll continue on back at the Jeep. Back over at the Jeep, let's get our bracket and our two bolts. It's a good idea to have a little bit of red thread locker on these. Put the bracket on, start in your bolts, and torque them to 80 foot-pounds. Before we go any further, double check your rotor braking surface just to ensure there's no debris on it such as brake fluid. Put on our brake pads. You're going to slide one ear into this groove here, one ear into that groove there, and then do the same on the inside pad as well. Now let's grab the rest of the caliper, slide it over the boots here. You want to make sure that you don't peen the boots over like this. You want to just push them in, line it up, and then we're going to put in our sliders. Make sure when you put them in, you put the one with the rubber boot on it up on the top. Slide that in, do the same for the lower. And we'll snug them up and torque them to 32 foot-pounds. Now we need to pay attention to the flex hose. Make sure that the area where the banjo bolt crush washers are going to be are nice and clean. Double check both sides. Make sure there's no debris inside this hole here. Now it's going to be time to put on our banjo bolt. You want to make sure that you have one of your crush washers on the banjo bolt. And then of course we're going to put it through the flex hose. Take our other crush washer, slide that on there. Line it up with the caliper. We'll start it in and then we'll snug it up. Now we'll bottom this out and torque it to 18 foot-pounds. Just a quick note, it's always a good idea to make sure that your master cylinder is full at all times. If it seems as though it's low, you need to add some .3 brake fluid. Now we can come up top. We'll take off our caliper hose pliers. Now let's remove our rubber bleeder screw cover. And now the next thing you would want to do, of course, if you're replacing the other caliper, you're going to do that now. Assuming you're done both, we're going to climb up inside the Jeep and we're going to pump up the brake. After that, we'll come right here, we're going to open this up and let it gravity bleed. Once you're sure your master cylinder is full, we're going to open up our bleeder screw and we're going to let it gravity bleed. What I mean by that is we're just going to essentially watch and wait until fluid starts trickling out without any air bubbles coming with it. Okay, so now that it's gravity bleeding, we're just going to take a quick peek and watch for air bubbles. Odds are you're not going to get them all out, but once you get a steady trickle of fluid, we'll close it up and then we'll start the manual bleed. That looks good enough for now. Let's go ahead and close this up. Okay, now for the next part, we need to manually bleed this like I said. For that, of course, you're going to want a collection bucket. Just bring it up to where it's handy. We're going to have our wrench and we're going to open this up. It's going to be easiest having a second person inside of the vehicle. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to have this closed. We're going to have the second person inside the vehicle pumping up the brake pedal very slowly. We're going to ask them to pump it 3 times, and on the 3rd time, they're going to hold the pedal. While they're holding the pedal, we'll open this up, and we're going to watch the fluid that comes out. We want it to be a steady stream of only brake fluid. If you see any air bubbles, you need to continue bleeding. This process can take several times. While you're doing it, make sure that you double check that master cylinder. If you run out of fluid, you're going to have to bleed all of your brakes. With that said, let's get started. Okay, go ahead and pump. All right, so that just went to the floor. I did see a little bit of air come out of there, so that means we're going to have to do this again. Go ahead and pump it up. All right, let's do that one more time. That last one, I didn't see very much air come out of it, but I did see a teeny air bubble. I want to ensure that I have no air inside of my brake system. Okay, so that time, fluid came out without any air. That tells me that it's perfect. If at this point you wanted to, you can continue on by bleeding just to ensure there's no more air. For me, I feel confident that it's good. So now, of course, we want to have the person inside the vehicle just pump up the brake so it's nice and firm. Go ahead and pump up that brake pedal, please. Now let's clean down our area. And of course, put on our protecting rubber boot. Let's take off this nut. Okay, let's get our wheel back up on here. We'll snug up the lug nuts, get the wheel so it's just barely touching the ground, and then torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Now with the wheel on the ground, we'll continue on to torquing the lug nuts in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Double check your brake fluid level. Assuming it's good, make sure your cap's on there. Okay friends, now all you have to do is just double check that your brake pedal's pumped up, you double check that brake fluid, and then take it for a road test.